Well, it's the last day of the World Economic Forum in Cape Town. Our SABC journalist Francis Hurd is standing by to give us an update on how things are going and, of course, a recap of what happened yesterday as well. Francis, a very, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Leanne.
So how were things yesterday? How did it all go?
Great, just jam-packed sessions back-to-back, often three at a row, at a time, simultaneously, some being broadcast around the world. So a big focus on where Africa has come from and where we're going to. I was interested in one session yesterday. Our former Deputy President, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, was quite passionate about inclusive growth. That's something that will come up again today. Yesterday, the focus was on how you get women involved in economies in Africa. So important, and that's guaranteed to uplift growth. She was saying that women are still punished for having children. Some other things coming up today, the Africa Progress Report, so all about where we've come from, and a big focus on infrastructure. And what all the delegates basically are saying is that this has to be prioritized. If we build the roads, the bridges, the schools, the electricity infrastructure, Africans can trade more easily with themselves, and we'll see these huge benefits. Leanne, I'm joined now by Razia Khan from Standard Chartered, usually based in London, so she can give us this global investor perspective. Welcome to you, Razia. And just tell me, these meetings, some people say it's a talk shop. We're hearing things come up about Africa's challenges, but we know what they are. They've come up before. Is this a talk shop, or can something spark? Could some good ideas come out of this? And what are investors looking at?
Well, first of all, in terms of the value of a conference like this, there are actually very few opportunities for that crucial dialogue between public sector figures and the private sector. The World Economic Forum is relatively unique in a sense in that it does bring everyone together. And even though we may all think we know about the challenges, how are we ever going to resolve them without talking about them? So useful from that perspective. How are investors looking at things at the moment? 2015 is, of course, going to be a year of slowdown for Africa's economies. Now, this is interesting because ever since the global crisis, we'd gotten very used to the fact that global growth had been recovering gradually, but African growth was doing particularly well. We haven't, since that time, been tested by a downward correction in commodity prices, which is happening now. It's creating a more difficult external environment for many countries.
So there's a fear that we may lose competitiveness, and all these young people are entering the market, the youngest population. And like you say, growth off the charts in some countries, but we're still a very poor continent. So how do we ensure that we don't lose competitiveness? What do you think should come out of this?
What is really needed, and what the competitiveness report focused on this year, was of course some of those longer term structural issues that do have a role in driving competitiveness. And the one thing that has become clear is that the boom bust of experience of growth isn't really going to do it for most African countries. What is needed for transformational growth, for a real lifting of human development prospects, is the sustained record of growth over time. Now, the weakness of commodity prices, the fact that the Fed is expected to tighten this year, the changing external environment, all of these might be seen as threats or perhaps an opportunity to get really serious about the structural reforms that are needed.
Let's talk about those reforms, and let's start with regional integration. A guest said yesterday, we've been talking about this for years and years and years. And I spoke to the equivalent of our Reserve Bank governor from Rwanda, just talking about how amazing it is. In East Africa, you can move around without passports, live anywhere, trade very easily. But we're not making those links between the different regions, and Southern Africa could benefit, couldn't it, from that?
That's a very key point. In fact, its importance probably shouldn't ever be underestimated. When we talk about regional trade, we're used to bemoaning the fact that Africa as a developing region sees less intra-regional trade than anywhere else. But of course, that trade or any economic activity is going to be facilitated by the free movement of people. And this is why what has happened in East Africa is so exciting. thing. It's the realization that you actually do need a degree of labour mobility as well. People should be free to go out and seek the best opportunities, and in fact something that isn't often recognised. When it comes to immigration, that is a good way of boosting an economy's potential. It does a lot more to create economic activity.
The xenophobic attacks, the visa issues that South Africa has been criticised for, has that made things difficult here for us, or are we sending a strong message?
This is hugely unfortunate. South Africa has a substantial skills gap, and to the extent that you see things like the xenophobic attacks happening, it sends a message to that skilled labour across the rest of Africa. This probably isn't a place where they might want to be. That comes at a huge cost to the economy. It is costing the South African economy growth. It is costing the South African economy future job creation, and every South African is worse off as a result.
What about Africa, this huge opportunity for us, because we are not growing like some of those African countries. So a lot of the retailers are looking elsewhere, a lot of the banks. Are we harnessing all those opportunities? And I heard something interesting yesterday. In one of the sessions, a Nigerian woman stood up and said, why isn't MTN listed in Nigeria? Why can't I invest in MTN? I think that was her argument, that South African countries are harnessing these big populations to sell their goods, but why aren't they raising capital in Africa as well?
Well, there are two parts to it. One recent change has been allowing fund managers in South Africa to do a lot more in the region. And of course, that is all part of developing closer regional integration, closer financial ties with the rest of Africa. But if you look at South Africa's advantages, it does have a substantially more developed financial system than is typically found across many frontier markets. But in thinking about how to deepen their own capital markets, a lot of governments are giving consideration to this idea of, do we need listings from elsewhere? There is a lot of debate about this, and it's not clear that that is necessarily the best way to go. But these debates are probably not going to go away anytime soon.
And more debating happening today. Thank you very much for your time. Razia Khan from Standard Chartered, usually based in London, but we're seeing this convergence of investors from all over the world, ministers certainly from all over Africa, and events will continue today, but start to rack up at about lunchtime. From the World Economic Forum in Cape Town, that's a wrap. We take a short break.